Today I'm going to show how to connect a Milwaukee grinder to the Raptor saw base. First thing you need to do is take your Milwaukee out of the box. Make sure the handles are off, because the screw holes on each side of the head where the handles go is what's going to hold it to the base. So we line it up, the holes on the base, and then we have larger screws that come with the Raptor that we will then install the Milwaukee to the base. After installing both screws, you don't completely tighten, leave it slightly loose so that you can have some adjustment to affect the vertical of the blade. After you fasten these in, leaving them slightly loose, there's really only four other screws that you're going to have for adjustment. We have two screws on the back side, one on the bottom, one on the top, that will adjust the blade to get plumb. And then we've got two screws on the base that will drive off of the water union as far as doing the toe in or toe out of the blade. So now we will install the blade and check for vertical. When installing the blade, you want to make sure that the inner flange is seated properly, and also that these are not warped. We have had some instances where this may get warped, and when you go to mount the blade and turn it, it will wobble. So it could be caused by the inner flange. So make sure that's good and flat. Seat the blade on properly. Fasten the blade up. Make sure by looking in behind that you've got it seated properly and that you have got the blade snug. Hit the spindle lock. I'm just going to hand tighten it now since I'm not actually running, and just setting up for accuracy on the alignment. Once we have the blade mounted, we need to make sure that we have it 90 degrees to the base. So with the base sitting on a flat surface, we're going to put a square up to the blade, and we're going to try to line up to where the top and the bottom of the blade are just touching. At this point, we will then screw both screws on the back into where they're both touching the grinder. Alright, after you install the blade and we're able to get the blade to 90 degrees, then the next adjustment we need to measure is for toe in or toe out, which we would do by measuring from the back edge of the base to the front edge of the blade and to the back edge of the blade, and we want to make it equidistance. If that is out, the measurements that the means of moving that is going to be by either the front or back set screw on the base. Before you adjust these, you take an Allen wrench and loosen the large nut on the blade side of the base, just quarter turn, because this is your pivot point that the base is now going to be able to move off of to toe it in or toe it out. At this point, we can then either move, depending on if you have toe in or toe out conditions. If we had the back of the blade out, we needed to move it in, we would then take the front, this being the front as the blade saw is going to cut in this direction, we would loosen the back set screw just a quarter turn, and then tighten the front screw against this, which would move the base back. You should be able to see the distance between the screw and the base and the edge of the aluminum block, and as you turn that screw just a small turn, you can see it draw it closer to it. And then you would again check your measurements, and once you've got it where you want it, snug up both the front and the back set screw, and then retighten the pivot point bolt. So after snugging, just touching both screws, screwing them in until they both touch the grinder, and we still see that we have the blade 90 degrees. So that's got us vertical. Now we have to check by measuring from the back edge of the Raptor to the edge of the blade. So we're going to measure two measurements, from the back of the blade and to the front of the blade, this being the front of the blade. So by taking a square or a tape measure, we're going to come in until we just touch the back of the blade. I'll lock it in place. Then I'll slide it down to the front and see. So at this point, the front of the blade, as the saw will be cutting in this direction, needs to be moved out. In other words, the back of the blade needs to be moved in. To do that, we need to move this block toward the front. So there are two set screws, so we will loosen the set screw on this side, and then we will tighten the one on this side, which will be pushing in against this union and allowing this whole piece to move gradually back, which will pull the back of the blade in, and it will move this out. And very minute movements of that screw will adjust the measurement you get here. Okay, so I'm going to reset it again. Come in until I just touch the blade. You don't want to push because it can deflect. And then we'll measure on this side. And at this point, it's just touching. And it is just off. So I am going to move this back slightly. So I'm just off of my measurement there, and it is just touching it there. So I'm going to tighten the screw in, trying to pull this end of the blade in slightly. As you can see, it just tightening up right there. Just touching, just touching. So as long as we still have this, the top and the bottom of the blade 90 degrees to the base, and then we've got the measurements here, the blade from the back edge of the Raptor saw is equal distance, then you should be able to get a straight cut. At this point, make sure your front screw is just touching where we had loosened it slightly here. If you had for some reason dropped your saw and knocked it out of square, it's possible you would have to push off with, in other words, tighten this one and back this one off if you needed to move the other direction. Recheck my measurements to make sure I'm still good. Just touching here. Slightly off. So I'll back this out slightly. just touching, and it should be good to cut. It doesn't hurt to go in and reset your measurement, check your measurements at this time to make sure something hasn't moved. And if your measurements look good, measure the same, you'd be good to start cutting.